Hello everybody, welcome back to your show, Go to Australia show. In this episode we're going to talk about family visas, and in particular we're going to talk about parent visas. And we're going to tell you how to bring your family here. In particular in this episode we're going to talk about how to bring your parents to Australia if you are an Australian citizen or an Australian permanent resident or an eligible New Zealand citizen. So let's talk about it. Parents can apply for either temporary visas or permanent visas, depending on their situation and yours. A parent can apply for a visitor visa as an example, and that doesn't matter whether you're an Australian resident or not. You can be a student, or a parent can have no one here in Australia and apply for a visitor visa. But the visas we're going to talk about today are those that are either permanent visas or temporary visas that require a sponsor, and that sponsor should be either a permanent resident of Australia or a citizen of Australia or an eligible New Zealand citizen. And we're going to tell you how. We start with permanent visas. We have two main categories of permanent visas for parents. We call them contributory visas and non-contributory. When we say contributory, obviously it means that you have to make some payments, extra payments, to be eligible to get those visas. And obviously non-contributory ones, you pay less or minimal amounts to be able to get those visas. The main difference obviously would be then if you pay for contributory visas, you get your visas in less time. And the other way around, if you pay less, you get the visa in a very longer time. And I tell you the average processing times for each of those categories. Before we go to each category, we need to see what's the main requirements for all parent visas, permanent parent visas I'm talking about. Obviously, the first criteria for a parent to get a permanent Australian visa is to have a child who is a settled Australian resident. The meaning of settled has been defined by the policymakers here as someone who has been living in Australia legally for at least 2 years. Obviously, this can be interpreted differently in different scenarios, but this is a common policy basically. For a resident of Australia to be able to sponsor their parents, they need to be settled, and that settled means they have been living in Australia for at least 2 years. The next criteria for parents to apply for permanent parent visas in Australia, they need to show that they meet the balance of family test. What that means is at least 50% of their children should live in Australia on a permanent visa, or they are citizens of Australia. I'll give you some examples so you can understand what that means by meeting balance of family test. Let's say if you have 5 children and 3 of them live in Australia and 2 live overseas. And the 3 who live in Australia, they are permanent residents or citizens of Australia. Yes, you obviously meet the balance of family test. There are other scenarios which are a bit more complex. If you have 5 children, 2 of them live in Australia, 1 live in your country, 1 live in another country, and 1 lives in another country on permanent basis. Do you meet the criteria? Yes, again. In Australia, you have more children than any other country. So in any case, you need to have 50% of your children living in Australia. That's either 50% or more children living in Australia than any other country. And when I say on a permanent basis, you can't say that my other child is living in blah blah country for 6 months. That is not considered as living permanently. So for meeting the balance of family test, the children should be living in particular country on a permanent basis. And that's how the government or the policymakers look at it. And the final criteria for parents to get Australian permanent residency is to meet a health and character criteria, which also called public interest criteria. So if you meet these criteria, you can apply then either for contributory parent visas or non-contributory parent visas, which we'll talk about. So what's non-contributory parent visas? Let's talk about them. We have a visa subclass 103, which is a parent visa, permanent parent visa, and that's for people who meet the criteria that I just explained. And the processing time for this visa is on average 25 years at the moment. So it's a very, very lengthy processing time. And that's the main downside for this visa application. Obviously, you pay less money, which is just an initial application fee of nearly, let's say, $4,000 for a parent. But the processing time is very, very long. So many people would go for the second visa that I'm going to talk about, and that's contributory parent visas. We have two subclasses of contributory parent visas. One is 173, which is a temporary parent visa, and 143, which is a contributory permanent parent visa. The difference would be mainly that for the temporary one, you pay less money and get a temporary 2 years visa, and then if you decide, you go ahead with the permanent one, and if not, you can basically return to your home country. For subclass 143, which is the permanent contributory parent visa, you will make a non-refundable payment of nearly $44,000 to the government when they're going to issue or grant you the visa. So basically, when you pass the character health check and they have checked everything and they see that you're eligible to be granted a visa, they will ask you to make the payment of, as I said, at the moment it's $43,600, roughly $44,000. And this could go up by the time you watch this program. These contributory parent visas usually take 4 years to be processed. Could be a bit less or more. On average these days it's 4 years. So as you would see, compared to the previous visa that I talked about, the one I said it takes 25 years. This is relatively shorter, 4 years, and sometimes even less. So most parents these days would go for this visa just because of the shorter processing time.
SBA Parramatta measures its value and services through client satisfaction. We help clients navigate the maze of tax laws. We provide on-time accounting, bookkeeping, taxation and self-managed super fund services for small to medium-sized businesses. We've been involved in a number of business startups. Many have remained with us as long-term accounting clients. For more info, call 1300 TAX SBA or visit our website at sbaparramatta.com.au.
Choice, not chance, makes destiny.
I want to talk to you also about some visas they called aged parent visas. These are certain visas for people, for parents who are, at least one of your parents, if they are over age 65.5 or let's say 66 years old, they can be considered as aged parents. When they are aged parents, if they are on shore, they are in Australia, they can apply for aged parent visas. Again, the two categories we talked about, and I'll explain the subclass and things like this. But the main requirement for these visas are the parent or one of the parents who would be the main applicant should be age 65.5 and over. Your child should be a settled resident, and you need to meet the balance of family test, and you can be then in Australia and apply for those visas. So what's the difference or what's the benefit in applying for aged parent visas? The main benefit we can say that is you can apply in Australia, what we call onshore application, and you will get a bridging visa for what the visa you apply for. So let's say you apply for a non-contributory aged parent visa, which could take 20 years to be processed. Because you're over a certain age and you apply in Australia, you will get a bridging visa and you can live in Australia legally for the next 20 years while your application is being processed. This is the main or the big benefit. But can everybody apply for aged parent visas even if they are aged over 65.5? No. The answer is no. Depending on what visa you are on in Australia and whether it has a condition called no further stay condition, you may be eligible to apply or may not. If your visa, whether you're on a tourist visa or whatever visa you are, if your visa says no further stay, that means you cannot apply for an aged parent visa within or inside Australia or onshore. You have to go offshore and apply for parent visas, the ones we explained before. Again, we have two categories. One, contributory aged parent visas, and the other one, non-contributory aged parent visas. And the difference again here is that you'll pay money for contributory aged parent visas, and they process much faster, usually 2 to 3 years. And in the other case, or in the other scenario, you don't have to pay, or you won't pay non-refundable amount of, let's say, $43,000 or $44,000, but your application would take a long time to be processed. But as I said, you can live in Australia legally while your application is being processed. Okay, so far we've talked about permanent parent visas. But there is a new visa. Since April 2019, we have a new visa called Temporary Parent Visa Subclass 780. This is for parents of Australian residents who don't meet the balance of family test, or they don't want to come here on a permanent basis, or they want to come here sooner. So basically that gives them all these options. It could be a 3 years visa or 5 years visa, and it can be extended for another 5 years. So it could go up to 10 years of visa for your parents if they want to come to Australia. In this scenario, they don't need to meet the balance of family test, and the visa is temporary. It doesn't lead to permanent residency. So it's a temporary visa, but it's a good one because the parents could come and live with their children or live in Australia for nearly 10 years or for 10 years if they wish. The sponsor, however, needs to meet some certain criteria. In this scenario, obviously, the sponsor should be a settled resident again. The sponsor should have a taxable income of over $80,000, and the sponsor should meet character tests. So it means they have to do police check and so on for themselves to meet the criteria. This is a new visa. It's been capped per year, and so far it's been announced that only 15,000 visas will be granted in the 2019-20 program. So it's not unlimited visas. As soon as the number reaches 15,000 visas this year, there would be no visas granted. Then the next year, the people who apply, they will be granted next year or the year after. So it depends how many people apply. The processing time could change. It's a new visa. We are not certain how many visas have been granted so far, but only just the last few weeks, quite a few numbers been granted. Okay, that's it for this program. As you saw, we talked about parent visas, both temporary and permanent parent visas, and we're going to talk about other family visas in the next episodes. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Telegram, wherever you can, Facebook and so on. And please provide us with your feedback so we can continue this program. Enjoy your day and night. See you next time.